right now, this is something I'd ask you to address specifically, that there are visas that were being granted to women who were the victims of domestic abuse, sexual assault, or some kind of attack because they were women, or exploited as sex slaves or whatever, and that they were able to get special visas as if they came forward and testified. Apparently, they've run out of those visas. There's only 10,000 of them, I understand. Are you familiar with that? And
the
what,
violence against women.
Yes, and what, if anything, is being done to possibly change or enhance that?
That was at the federal level, and I am not aware that there was a certain amount and that it was capped. I think that's a question for my congresswoman. I haven't kept up on that issue, but VAWA has been used very effectively by advocates for women of domestic violence to get them, you know, permanently in this country.
What more can be done by the City Council? We now have laws in New York City and New York State, for that matter, and to certain degrees in federal, that have made hate crimes punishable by greater punishments than simply committing the actual attack, the actual assault, all right? That enhanced penalty if it's deemed to be a hate crime. What more, if anything, really can be done, or do we have to turn attention to other kinds of venues to stop that kind of behavior and thwart that kind of behavior?
Yes, and, you know, as a city council person, there's really nothing I can do. And what the power I have is the power of organizing, and the fact that I'm in my community as opposed to my congresswoman who's always in Washington. And so when the Mexican man last year was beaten when he was going over the Williamsburg Bridge, leaving my neighborhood and getting food from a food pantry, I went out there with other council members and we gave out flyers trying to get information. If anyone saw something, please report it. And Debbie Rose is doing this in Staten Island right now. It's having community meetings and educating kids and educating people and trying to get people to work together and to come forward with information. It's really the only thing we have. And since they see us in the neighborhood more than other elected officials, then we can bring them all in and get communities to work together. But particularly what's happening in Staten Island is so disheartening. It's just been a couple of months. There's been 10 incidents of bias attacks there, and I know my colleague Debbie Rose is at her wit's end. She does.
Well, what about issues about the home, parents? What messages they're giving their kids about all this? What about television, the media? Do you think that they're doing enough to counteract this trend?
I think parents have a role, but then there's the schools, and there are your friends at schools, and this culture and the music and the video games. It's all about violence, and it makes violence seem very acceptable, and it dehumanizes people when you're sitting in front of a TV shooting away at individuals or animals or whatever the game happens to be. It makes it very easy, I think, to transcend that into real life.
Also, I wanted to ask you quickly about the fact that while it's estimated that as many as 80% of the people who are in this country illegally are Latinos, still there's another 20% that includes Chinese, Irish, Polish. I can go down the list. I don't have time for the entire list. Do you see that the focus seems to be almost exclusively on Latinos and that these other people are never mentioned?
It seems like it's more attacks on Latinos. And certainly when I look at all the cases that have happened recently, for some reason there seems to be a spike within the Latino groups. But there still has been attacks on other people of color, and part of it is though people are afraid to report them. People are afraid to report the attacks.
I'm sorry if you didn't understand. I'm referring to the focus that illegal immigrant equals Latino in so many people's minds, when there are people here illegally from a variety of different countries.
And I'll tell you a story. I was in Puerto Rico recently, and my aunt told me that one of her neighbors moved from Puerto Rico to Arizona, and that in the schools they kept calling and writing to the parents and asking for their green card. And they're like, we don't have a green card. I don't know what you're talking about. And they actually had no idea what it was, because they're citizens, and they didn't
Right.
know that if you're not a citizen, you're supposed to have a green card to be in this country, to be a documented person in this country. So, so when I explained all this to her, she got on the phone and called her friend and said, "This is what's going on. You need to tell them that you're a citizen."
How's this all playing out in your district?
Well, we see, we see more attacks like we saw on the Asians. I've, during the years, have seen, I think this is a battle of the have-nots against the have-nots. So when we see a lot of the Latinos I speak to feel like we're losing housing and we're losing services because all the Asians are moving in. And what I tell them is the Asian community has been in Chinatown and they've applied for a lot of this housing, and finally they're getting called on this waiting list. So it's not like services are being diverted, but like every immigrant group, you come here, you wait, and eventually the services get to you. And I think because of that, we've seen some of the anti-Asian sentiment that I've seen in my community, and then some of the attacks that we've heard about and witnessed.
But still, there's a tremendous need for more of that kind of housing, and the scarce resource with a lot of people who need it, that tends to set people against each other.
Right.
And as the young lady, or the older lady, Shirley Sherrod said, the woman who was accused of having denied aid to a white farmer, and it turns out that wasn't the moral of her story at all, that it was about coming to see that it was not about race, that it was really about the haves and the have-nots, and that seems to be playing out.